Pickup trucks and semis have gone through more reinventions than almost any other vehicle on the road. Some ideas stuck around so long we forgot they were ever innovations at all. Others were once so common that entire generations of drivers built their habits around them, and then they vanished almost overnight. Some were killed by technology, some were killed by regulation, and at least one of them was killed because it was literally killing people. These are 10 truck innovations that did not stand the test of time. Number 10. Vent windows. Walk up to any vintage Ford F-100 or Chevrolet C10 at a truck show and you'll spot them right away. Those small triangular panes of glass sitting at the front corner of each door window hinged so they could pivot outward like little sails. Old-timers called them wing windows, and before air conditioning became affordable, they were the climate control system. Crack one open at an angle and it would scoop fresh air straight into the cab, right across your face and hands. Farmers, ranchers, and delivery drivers spent entire summers alive because of those little triangles of glass. Trucks actually held on to vent windows years longer than passenger cars did. Work trucks were sold to buyers who didn't want to pay extra for air conditioning, so that free breeze mattered. But three things eventually sealed their fate. Factory air conditioning got cheap enough that even base model trucks could have it. Designers wanted cleaner door lines and better aerodynamics, because every piece of chrome trim and every extra seal creates wind noise and drag at highway speed. And there was one more problem nobody likes to talk about. Vent windows were a thief's best friend. Pop the little latch with a screwdriver, reach in, and unlock the whole truck in about 4 seconds. By the late 80s, they were gone from nearly every truck on the market, replaced by a single smooth pane of glass. Modern climate control does the job better, sure, but nothing on a new truck feels quite like rolling down a dirt road with the wing window cracked just right. And if vent windows seem quaint, wait until you see where the gear shifter used to live. Number 9. 3-on-the-tree column shifters. If you learned to drive after the 90s, this one might genuinely confuse you. For decades, millions of American pickups had a 3-speed manual transmission shifted by a long lever mounted directly on the steering column. Drivers called it 3-on-the-tree, and there was a real logic behind it. With no shifter sticking up out of the floor, the entire cab floor stayed flat, which meant a full bench seat could hold 3 people across. For a farm truck or a work crew rig, that third seat was worth real money. The pattern took some learning. Pull the lever toward you and down for first, up and away for second, straight down for third, and reverse hiding up near the wheel. The linkage ran through a series of rods and pivots down the column, and when those wore out, the whole thing could bind up between gears. Every old truck guy has a story about jumping out on a hill, popping the hood, and yanking the linkage free by hand while traffic stacked up behind them. Column-shifted manuals hung on in American pickups longer than almost anywhere else, with basic work trucks from General Motors still offering them into the late 80s. But floor shifters were simply better. Shorter linkage, crisper feel, more gears. Once buyers started demanding 4 and 5 speeds, the tree was done. Automatic column shifters survived a while longer in trucks and vans, but even those have mostly given way to console levers and dash-mounted buttons. The next one didn't just change how you drove. It made you get out of the truck entirely. Number 8. Manual locking hubs. Here's a ritual that every old-school 4-wheel drive owner remembers. You're at the edge of a muddy trail or a snowed-in driveway. Before the truck will actually pull with all 4 wheels, you have to climb out, walk to the front bumper, kneel down in the slush, and twist a dial in the center of each front wheel hub from free to lock. In the rain, in the dark, every single time. Those dials were manual locking hubs, and they existed for a smart reason. On early 4-wheel drive trucks like the classic Willys and the first Ford Broncos and Chevy K-Series pickups, the front axle was always connected to the front wheels. Even in 2-wheel drive, all that front driveline hardware kept spinning, wasting fuel and grinding away at gears and bearings. Locking hubs let you disconnect the front wheels from the axle completely. Highway driving with the hubs free meant better mileage, less noise, and a driveline that lasted years longer. Companies like Warren built an entire business around them starting in the late 40s. The problem was human nature. People forgot to lock them until they were already stuck. So manufacturers developed automatic hubs that engaged on their own, and eventually shift-on-the-fly systems with electronic actuators that could connect the front axle at the push of a dash button at speed without anyone kneeling in the mud. By the 2000s, Manual hubs had retreated to heavy-duty trucks and hardcore off-road rigs, and today they're nearly extinct on showroom floors. Convenient? Absolutely. But the next feature wasn't killed by convenience, it was killed by fashion. Number 7. Stepside beds. Look at photos of pickups from the 30s, 40s, and early 50s, and you'll notice every single one has the same rear end. A narrow cargo box tucked between the rear wheels, with the fenders bolted on outside the bed, and a little step between the cab and the rear fender so you could climb up and grab your cargo. The bed was a straight-sided box, and the wheels had to go somewhere. Then in the mid-50s, Chevrolet dropped the Cameo carrier, and Ford rolled out the Style Side. Trucks with smooth, full-width bed walls that hid the rear wheels inside the box. Suddenly the bed was wider. The truck looked like one clean piece of design instead of a cab with a crate behind it, and buyers went crazy for it. The old design needed a name to distinguish it, so it became the Stepside or Flare Side, and it started dying almost immediately. Here's the strange part, though. Stepsides refused to fully disappear for another 50 years. The Fleet Side was objectively better for hauling, with more cubic feet and flat walls for securing loads. But the Stepside looked cool, all hot rod curves and exposed fenders, so Chevy, Ford, and Dodge kept them alive as retro-style options all the way into the 2000s. Eventually the math caught up. Low sales, extra tooling costs, and crash and lighting regulations made a second bed design impossible to justify. The body style that defined the pickup truck for its first 25 years is now purely a classic show item. The next innovation wasn't made of steel at all. It was made of radio waves. Number 6. The CB radio. Breaker 19. For a stretch of the 1970s, that phrase was as American as the national anthem. Citizens Band radio had existed since the 40s. But when the '73 oil crisis brought a national 55-mile-per-hour speed limit and fuel shortages, truckers turned Channel 19 into a rolling information network, where the speed traps were, which stations actually had diesel, which way stations were open. Every trucker had a handle. A whole slang language developed, and the culture exploded into the mainstream. The song Convoy hit number 1 in 1975, and Smokey and the Bandit put a CB in every kid's dream truck. At the peak of the craze, millions of radios were selling every year, and not just to truckers. Family station wagons had them. Grandmothers had handles. The Federal Communications Commission was so buried in license applications that it eventually just stopped requiring licenses altogether. For professional drivers, the CB genuinely worked. It was free, instant, and everyone was on it. But its greatest strength was also its weakness, because there was no privacy, limited range, and plenty of channel clutter. Cell phones picked off the personal calls. Smartphone apps took over traffic and fuel reports. Electronic dispatch and fleet telematics replaced the chatter between drivers and their companies. Plenty of long-haul trucks still carry a CB today, especially for oversized loads and backcountry routes. But the radio has gone from the beating heart of trucking culture to a dusty backup tool. Now, this next one you didn't need a radio to hear. You could hear it from a mile away. Number 5. The two-stroke Detroit diesel. Every engine on this list made a sound, but only one of them made a legend. Starting in 1938, General Motors built a family of two-stroke diesel engines under the Detroit diesel name, and for half a century they powered everything in America that worked for a living. Dump trucks, city buses, fire engines, generators, boats, and countless semis ran engines like the 671, a number that simply meant 6 cylinders of 71 cubic inches each. A two-stroke diesel fires every single revolution instead of every other one like a normal 4-stroke, and it needs a gear-driven roots blower just to breathe. The result was an unmistakable high-pitched howling scream at full throttle that earned these engines the nickname Screamin' Jimmy. Ask any old trucker or equipment operator, and they can imitate the sound on command, usually with a big grin. The design had real advantages: huge power from a compact package, dead simple architecture, and parts availability everywhere on the continent. But two strokes had one fatal weakness: they were thirsty, they leaked, and they smoked. When federal emission standards for heavy trucks tightened through the 80s and 90s, there was no realistic way to make the old two-stroke clean. Detroit Diesel saw it coming and launched the 4-stroke Series 60 in 1987, which became one of the best-selling truck engines ever. By the late 90s, The scream was silenced in on-highway trucks for good. If you're enjoying this trip down memory lane, hit subscribe because I cover forgotten vehicle history like this every week. Now buckle up because the next item on this list got people killed. Number 4. Split-rim Widowmaker wheels. For decades, the wheels on heavy trucks weren't one solid piece of steel. They were multi-piece assemblies, with a rim base and a separate locking ring that snapped into place around the outer edge to hold the tire on. The design existed for a practical reason. Early truck tires were stiff, heavy things that were nearly impossible to stretch over a one-piece rim, so a removable ring made mounting them manageable with hand tools in any roadside shop. The problem was what happened when things went wrong. That locking ring was holding back a tire inflated to 80 or 100 pounds of pressure. If the ring was rusted, bent, mismatched, or improperly seated, it could let go without warning and turn into a steel projectile launched with explosive force. Mechanics called them Widowmakers, and they earned the name. Tire workers were killed or maimed by ring separations for decades, often while doing nothing more exotic than airing up a tire. The blast could take off a hand, cave in a chest, or punch through a shop ceiling. The fix came from two directions. Tubeless tire technology and better rubber compounds made one-piece drop-center wheels practical for heavy trucks, eliminating the ring entirely. And workplace safety regulators cracked down hard, requiring inflation cages, clip-on air chucks, and strict service procedures for any multi-piece wheels still in use. New trucks abandoned split rims, and today they survive mainly on vintage equipment and old military vehicles, where experienced mechanics treat every one of them like a loaded weapon, because that's essentially what they are. The next casualty on our list wasn't dangerous at all. It was just fighting a war it could never win. Number 3. Gasoline engines in heavy trucks. This sounds strange today, but for a huge chunk of the 20th century, plenty of serious working trucks burned regular gasoline. Medium-duty delivery trucks, grain trucks, fire apparatus, and even genuine highway semis were commonly powered by big gas engines, including massive V8s built specifically for truck duty. Gasoline engines were cheaper to buy, easier to start in cold weather, quieter, and any corner mechanic could work on one. For a farmer who drove his grain truck a few thousand miles a year, gas made perfect sense. Diesel had been creeping into trucking since the 30s, but for a long time, diesel engines carried a big price premium and a reputation for being loud, smelly, and cold-blooded. The turning point was pure economics. A diesel burns dramatically less fuel doing the same work because diesel fuel carries more energy per gallon and the engine itself converts it more efficiently. A gas engine hauling heavy loads at highway speed drinks fuel at a rate that will genuinely frighten you, and it wears out fast under that strain, while a well-maintained diesel can run 500,000 miles or more. Once the fuel crises of the 70s sent gas prices spiraling, the math became unavoidable for anyone running real miles. Diesel conquered the semi-truck completely, then took over medium-duty work, and gas power retreated down to pickups and vans. The full-size gasoline truck engine never entirely died, and gas has actually made a small comeback in some fleets lately. But the era of a gasoline-powered 18-wheeler pulling freight across the country is long gone. Speaking of things that vanished from truck cabs, number 2 isn't a single part. It's an entire philosophy. Number 2. The true work truck interior. Climb into a base pickup from the 60s or 70s and take inventory. A painted steel dashboard, a rubber floor mat you could hose out, a vinyl bench seat that seated 3 and survived decades of dogs, tools, and spilled coffee. Crank windows, a cigarette lighter, an ashtray big enough to double as a coin tray, and if you were lucky, an AM radio with 1 speaker. That was the whole truck, and it was exactly what buyers wanted, because a pickup was a tool that lived on job sites and farms. Almost every piece of that interior has since gone extinct. The ashtray and lighter faded as smoking declined, with the lighter socket surviving only as a power outlet for phone chargers. The 3-across bench seat gave way to buckets and consoles, hanging on today only in a handful of fleet configurations. Vinyl and rubber were replaced by carpet, leather, and touchscreens. What really happened is that the pickup truck changed species. Somewhere between the 90s and today, trucks stopped being tools and became family vehicles, status symbols, and even luxury purchases, with top trim levels crossing 6 figures. The average new pickup buyer now hauls kids more often than lumber, and automakers chase the fat profit margins in leather-lined crew cabs. Try to find a genuinely stripped rubber floor crank window work truck on a dealer lot today, and you'll discover most brands barely build them, and dealers barely stock them. The honest work truck got outvoted by its own success, which brings us to number 1, the most iconic disappearance in all of trucking. Number 1, the American cabover. Flat nose, huge windshield, the driver sitting directly on top of the engine. The cabover semi-truck is one of the most recognizable silhouettes in transportation history. The Kenworth K100 became a television star on BJ and the Bear, and Freightliner, Peterbilt, White, and International all built legions of these flat-faced haulers through the 60s and 70s. At their peak, cabovers made up a massive share of the American highway fleet. The cabover wasn't really a style, though. It was a legal loophole. For decades, federal and state rules limited the overall length of a tractor and trailer combined. Every foot of hood on your tractor was a foot of trailer, and therefore a foot of paying freight that you had to give up. Fold the cab flat over the engine, and suddenly you could pull the longest legal trailer on the road. Fleets bought cabovers because the law effectively forced them to. Then in 1982, the Surface Transportation Assistance Act changed everything. The new rules regulated trailer length instead of overall length, meaning the tractor's hood no longer counted against your freight. Overnight, the cabover's entire reason for existing evaporated, and on every other score, drivers preferred conventionals. A long hood gives a smoother ride instead of sitting over the front axle, easier engine access instead of tilting the whole cab, better crash protection, and no climbing a ladder just to get into bed. Within 15 years, the American cabover was essentially dead, even as it stayed dominant in Europe and Japan, where tight length laws never went away. So what's the common thread running through all 10 of these? Almost none of these features failed because they were bad ideas. Vent windows, locking hubs, split rims, and cabovers all solved real problems brilliantly. Then the problem itself disappeared. Air conditioning got cheap, electronics got smart, tires got better, and one stroke of a pen in Washington erased the cabover's whole purpose. Trucks don't just evolve with technology. They evolve with fuel prices, safety rules, and the changing lives of the people who drive them. And that means some feature sitting in a brand new truck today, maybe the diesel engine itself, is quietly waiting for its turn on a list like this one. If you want more forgotten vehicle history, the perfect next watch is our video on 10 car innovations that didn't stand the test of time. It's on screen right now, so click it. Thanks for riding along, and I'll see you in the next one.